Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. In December 1989, there was an explosion at a Con Ed plant in the southernmost part of the Bronx that, according to the New York Times, sent flames roaring hundreds of feet into the sky, killed 2 people, and forced a shutoff of power and subway service in large sections of the Bronx and Manhattan for several hours. People who live in the area and local advocates say that since that horrible accident 35 years ago, the waterfront in the southernmost part of the Bronx has never been the same. But tonight, here on Bronx Talk, after countless hours, years really, of community meetings, collaborations with a huge range of organizations, and for the first time, a leading South Bronx advocate and a representative from the Bronx Economic Development Corporation will reveal plans that they say will transform what has been, well, a disastrous shoreline into a life-giving community space with access to natural waterfront and so many more things. That is only the beginning, they say. It's our pleasure to welcome back to Bronx Talk the co-founder of South Bronx Unite and a board member of the Mott Port Morris Community Land Stewards, Mychal Johnson. Always nice to have you with us, Mychal.
Glad to be here, Gary.
Thank you. And also welcome back to Bronx Talk, the Director of Outreach for the Bronx Economic Development Corporation, Marshall Strawbridge. Always good to see you, Marshall.
Likewise.
Mostly
Gary.
because you bring good stuff, and that's why we want to have you. Mychal, I have to say, you know, I can't pretend that I don't know you for a long time.
True.
And I recall, it's got to be at least 10 years ago that you said, hey, Gary, come down, you got to see this. And I hung around with you, and we walked through the South Bronx. I remember even walking underneath what is now the RFK, the Triborough Bridge, and you showed me these basketball courts that were just not fit for bouncing a basketball, and shorelines. I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? And right now, today, tonight, you're finally getting ready to say we have really good plans to do something for real here. Just talk to me a little bit about what was, and we'll show some pictures of, because you took pictures for us of what it looks like, and people are going to go, oh, it's disgusting. And what are your hopes, and what is the general plan now? And we'll break it down as we go along.
Well, we have a peninsula, a community that lives in the peninsula that has no access to it. In this site, we're talking about one of 2. It's really a much larger plan, but we're really designating is looking at 1 or 2 catalyst projects to activate, finally to reinvigorate, to repair, to renew, and to re-engage the community on spaces that will actually bring our community to the water's edge for healthier and quality of life enhancements.
And it's pretty exciting. I mean, you can see, like, for example, there's the Fresh Direct area, which has it's nice, but it has a terrible shoreline. Look at this.
That's what we're talking about. That's a pier that was destroyed in 1989, as you mentioned, and that's the access we have in the South Bronx to the peninsula. Especially in I don't want to stereotype it, but in a community that has so many health concerns, has airborne disease concerns, and all the other issues. I mean, folks, you can just see it. We're showing these deliberately to show you this is what this has looked like since that time. Yes,
I wasn't aware of that. I didn't remember the Con Ed thing. And that last one, by the way, shows you how nice it could be if they fixed it up. I wasn't aware till you told me about that Con Ed fire, which was really the beginning of the end, so to speak. Before we bring Marshall into the dialogue, who are the land stewards? Now, this whole idea of who owns the land is, in a way, a new concept or an old concept, but it's coming to the fore now. So who are the Mott Port Morris Community Land Stewards?
Thank you for asking. The land stewards are individuals and a couple organizations that came together in 2015 to push back on how public land has been used against us in the South Bronx. So we could reclaim the land, of public land, that we can create different opportunities for our community, where we can be the guardians now of our own public trust. We've seen what public land has been given to private developers over and over again for decades, creating some of the harm you spoke about, with high rates of asthma, obesity, diabetes, where jobs were supposed to have been created on this public land and never trickled down. What we got was exhaust fumes and poor health outcomes. So the land stewards were created to come together with community ownership of public land to steward these spaces to create healthier outcomes for community members.
And what's the legal foundation for doing that? You can't just say, well, it's like we put a stake in the ground like the old pilgrims, and we own the land.
Well, it's not homesteading like I think you're describing, but it's a nonprofit organization it's got a 501c3 status, has a board, and it has members of the community coming together to envision and re-engage these spaces that we are trying to reclaim and create projects and programs to better our own health outcomes.
Last thing, and I really do want to bring the EDC into this. You use the word against. Now, that would suggest that there was an intent. Do you really mean that? I know you feel strongly about it.
Well, I can give you several
feel strong
examples
about the inequities. Yeah, go right ahead.
I mean, in 1996, the land that we're talking about, the Harlem River Yard, was leased to a developer for 99 years. Then friend of Governor Mario Cuomo. Then in 2001, Governor Pataki put 4 peaker plants in that same area when he put 11 around the state, right? And then in 2012, 13, governor, mayor at that time, and borough president gave Fresh Direct a sweetheart deal of putting this 500,000 foot plant sitting on a Native American burial ground, public land. So it never really trickled down in all those instances in terms of better and our quality of life.
And that's why that photograph I showed of Fresh Direct, and you know, I know that they've done a lot of things positive for the Bronx, helping to deliver food and all that. And I don't know what the status of their electric truck fleet is. That's another whole story. But the waterfront in front of there is, you know, it's like if you were going to do that, why not fix up the waterfront at the same time? Mychal Strawbridge, let's just talk about the Bronx EDC. Why is this project so important, and why have you and your colleagues got so involved to work this?
Sure. Hats off to the work that Mychal and his team at South Bronx Unite and the land stewards have done to bring this project to light and bring it to a place where we're really able to begin chasing resources for it. What I think our involvement really signals, and the reason why we're eager to be a part of it, is the transformative impact or the potential impact that we believe this has. The waterfront in the South Bronx is one of the last pieces of undeveloped waterfront in the entire city. It's a truly untapped resource here in the Bronx, and this is really, as Mychal described it, a catalyst project that I believe will not only transform those 2 sites where we're looking to undergo the catalyst project, but really kick off a transformation of that entire waterfront, and do so in a way that is responsive to the needs of the people who live there. In
preparation for this, you've been very clear to me and to Mr. Johnson here that the money is not there yet. This is now your first look, your first real public discussion about this, but there's a lot of work to do on the economic development end. So what is that like, and where are we going? What do we have to do to financially make this happen?
We have to submit an application to the EPA detailing a plan that they find feasible and compelling, and we're very confident that the work that we've done so far is just that. Exactly.
You talked about, and I want to break them down, about a process to get there, and I mentioned the 10 years and maybe more, 20 years. I really want to start adding them up. Talk about the process. You've been very proud of the number of organizations that have gotten involved. Let's talk about that. We have some pictures of you know, what it took to get there. Yeah. So explain how we got all the way back from 1989 when that happened to now 2024.
Yeah, we kept being in front of the issue by bringing folks out to that peninsula, like I took you there. We did environmental justice bike tours, walking tours, bringing residents from local hospitals there to see why our people are going to the emergency rooms, and making sure we really foment the idea that there can be a different way, and this is an injustice on its face. So, but our community has come together on multiple opportunities for envisioning what that should be. is not coming from the top down. We're trying to come from the ground up and create the change necessary. And so the community has come together and re-envisioned even recently on what you're seeing now, what this catalyst project should be, what kind of implementation should take place to make what we are desiring, which is a cleaner environment, healthier opportunities, and recreational opportunities for the community.
Well, what I really like of the, you had shared those photos with us, which we just showed, is that first you kind of showed people, much like you toured me through the area, you showed people and brought in groups, and then you really had them looking at maps and what was it, what emerged for you from a lot of those discussions about what people want to see? Or is it so obvious?
No.
It's silly even to
so many
ask.
collaborations came out of doing just that. So many seeds that were planted, but we collaborated with so many institutions, and just recently we worked with Earth Economics, who put an actual number to the building out of the entire waterfront plan is cost benefit to the social benefit. It will cost about $120 million to build out the entire
$120 million
to build out the entire Mott Port Morris waterfront plan, but its annual investment or return is $250 million each year in terms of social benefits. So we've added a quantitative number to what it would be in terms of the benefits, which that speaks a whole nother level of language to folks who only hear dollars and cents. We know as a community that we need to get to our water. We shouldn't have to go somewhere else to get what everyone else has. So we've built collaborations with a number of institutions.
I know you're proud of them. You want to name some people or not yet?
I mean, well, going back, just several years, say 7 years ago, then Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., current City Council member Rafael Salamanca, and then Speaker of the City Council Melissa Margarito came together and put $2.75 million towards this same project. And it's still sitting in DLT's coffers, which we're going to also add to the redevelopment of this pier.
When you mentioned the dollar amount, I thought you were going to do this to the guy sitting next to you and say, hey, this is what so now you're really looking at serious grants to make this happen. Do you want to talk about some of them? Because we want everybody to see how great this is, how important it is. And I want to just add one thing before you answer that. When you talk about, the amount of economic advantage, you're saving on healthcare costs if people don't have to go to the doctor. You're improving
mental health as well.
Mental health, which is needless to say, food insecurity, recreation, families being healthier, families doing better. Just again, Mychal, so who's gonna figure it out? There are grants out there.
That's right. The main funding source that we're chasing right now is the EPA Community Change Grant. And one of the reasons why we feel very confident about our stature is this project was selected as one of 50 throughout the entire country to receive additional technical assistance to put our application together. It's a $20 million grant, so as you can imagine, the grant application is quite substantial. But what that award has allowed us to do is put together a really strong application, a really strong team of technical partners to put our application together and really tell the story of what we're trying to do and take that to the EPA.
What is really, for me, having sat in this seat for so many years, what is really very enjoyable to see is that the borough president, Rob Walsh, who's the director over there at the EDC, finally, I don't mean finally, but it's taken a while, understand the economic benefit of doing something like this and realize that it's not just a bunch of nice community people who want to have a garden, but it really has implications all the way down the line. So I want to congratulate the borough president and Rob and you and all the folks there. Because you understand that, right?
Thank you, Gary. Yes, we really are excited to be a part of this precisely for what you said. It's something that not only will affect that area, but transform that
EDC world. Is not only about bringing in big business, which of course you spend every day doing, but really looking at our communities and how we can build from the ground up.
Guaranteed.
You mentioned at the beginning, Mychal, that there were two different plans. Now, if I've got it right, let's see. There's the Mott Port Morris waterfront plan, and then the Lincoln Avenue 132nd Street Catalyst project, right?
Right. Well, they're not separate. Actually, the Lincoln Avenue project
I realize it's all connected.
Is part of the Mott Port Morris comprehensive waterfront plan.
Okay.
But there's the Lincoln Avenue Street end, and there's also the 132nd Street Pier, the one that you showed the photos of, which was charred and left in ruins and still sits the same way. Those are the major projects we're looking to fund and with the EPA funding.
So all the way farther, I guess that's west, is the Bankside project.
Correct, at Lincoln Avenue.
And that's kind of a private development that's established the waterfront. The idea here is to extend that all the way down east across the southern part of the borough, right?
Well, this plan's been, of course, envisioned a lot longer than Bankside, even before they purchased.
No question about it.
What they've done, is wonderful, right? We need access any and everywhere that's publicly accessible, and the public needs to know that's public.
Right.
What we're building out is made by the community, for the community, by the Bronx, for the Bronx, and meaning that this is all publicly accessible greenway that we're trying to create. We're trying and envisioned by local residents, so it's theirs. It's not owned by an entity, not even the stewards. We're stewarding for the community. We're making sure that this is something that's there in perpetuity for our residents, and not because of who's coming, but who's already here, who should have that kind of accessibility.
We've got a couple of images to get people to see. We showed you the here it is. Here's the Randall's Island connector, and I remember you walked me through there,
Yes.
and I was like, "Wait
That
a minute!"
took 20 years to actually have that horizontal path to Randall's Island.
I remember.
Yeah, that used to be a fenced-off area that we couldn't get to. We had to take the Triborough Bridge to get to Randall's Island, to then use the Bronx Kill to show folks how to use canoes. Now we can go there by bike, but that does lead you also to the 132nd Street Pier.
And I also remember, which I was not aware of, here's the 132nd Street
Pier.
vision.
Yes.
Imagine how nice. I mean, I've seen, as I said earlier, I've seen those basketball courts. Boy, whew, we really we really need some work on those. I'm always concerned about those kinds of things. But I distinctly remember you walking me under there, and I was never aware that there was a walking path up to the of course we should call it the RFK, to the Triborough Bridge. And that's all part of this vision that this is our borough, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah, we're trying to get folks to the water's edge, where the air's cleaner, where you're close to a natural resource. When you're close to water, you feel different as a human being. Why don't we have that access? And we have 106 acres that we have is inaccessible. The only 2 points of entry right now is Lincoln Avenue, 132nd Street Pier. Neither really inviting. I've taken you to both. One you have to go through a fence to get to it, 132nd Street Pier, which sits in ruins. When you look across the East River, you're looking at Astoria Park, all green. You're looking at Randall's Island, all green. You can see the city skyline. But when you see where you're standing, it shows inequity and injustice is slapping us in the face.
I have to tell you, over the Labor Day weekend, my wife and I took the New York City ferry from all the way from Ferry Point all the way down. And
Beautiful.
what you just described was exactly, and there were some people who were not from New York, and of course I knew exactly what we were looking at. And they said, "Wow, what's this?" And because it was industrial, and I said, "Well, that's the South Bronx." And then of course we did look across, and you could see exactly what you just described. Marshall, I want to just talk about the process and how things get done. This process that Mychal described reminded me of what they're trying to do at the Kingsbridge Armory. Rather than have somebody else build it, have community people get together, and what do we want in our communities? I assume EDC thinks this is a very healthy way of going about development.
That's right. When we think about the difference between economic development and people-centered economic development rather than gentrification, I think that one of the key differences is how reflective are the values and the needs of the people who are here currently in the plans that we develop. And I think that the work that was done around the Kingsbridge Armory and certainly this project are emblematic of good people-centered economic development.
And for a borough that has been self-conscious about the fact that nobody loves us, nobody gets it done, so we better do it ourselves. This is, I think it's a learning thing that we can figure out how to do it. You sent me a list of objectives of what you hope to get. So let's see, provide community access to a natural waterfront space, improved shoreline environmental quality, habitat creation. This is what we did at the Bronx River. again, things seem to,
Yes.
if you sit in this seat like as long as I have, things seem to link up. This is exactly what we did at the Bronx River. And now, of course, this is in a way, a larger vision. The thing that really was interesting, aside from the green infrastructure and putting trees up and all that, which was very interesting, is green job training opportunities. So can you describe, because that brings our friend Marshall into it, because that is real economic development, but talk about the kinds of jobs that could be available as we develop this. And I hope the potential funders will look at this and say, oh yeah, this is not just building gardens. This is really changing lives.
Yeah,
so why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, from the federal government down, there's a new green economy. Not talking about dollar economy. It's talking about the green infrastructure, renewable energy, where there's a huge workforce development arm to that. That because it's traversing our community, there has to be a heavy investment in it. What I mean by that is renewable energy that's being transmitted from upstate New York and offshore wind will be in Mott Haven, being either transmitted or converted. What we're trying to do is say we need to make sure we train our folks in our community so they can get those jobs. And so we're looking at some locations to do that. Don't want to maybe not talk about the sites now on this show, but there are sites we're looking at to partner with those larger developers to make sure we can train our folks locally for that employment.
And again, it's got tentacles, good tentacles all through, because then you're looking at community centers, you're looking at job development things, and if you can build those up, I guess that becomes part of the sales, so to speak, and part of the question. Talk about that, because of course economic development is, again, that's what you're here for.
I can't stress enough how important it is for us to be investing in workforce development around the green economy. The fact of the matter is, we're already behind in the Bronx in terms of our people's ability to access high-paying jobs. And so when you talk about a transformation of the economy, if we're not investing now in our people's ability to compete in this transformed economy, the green economy, we're only talking about being further behind. So now is the time for us to be making those investments in our people to be able to compete in the green economy.
Well, one of the issues there, and I know you folks would be very strongly in favor of union jobs, but then that requires real training.
Precisely.
And then again, I'm assuming a grant would then go to say, well, a portion of this has to go to job training and job development, which is foremost in this borough. Mychal, the new pier. Talk about a new pier. Where is that going to be? That's part of the plan. Where is that going to be, and what is the vision of that?
Well, that image you showed of the charred pier, that's the remains of the explosion.
I don't want to show it again. I can't even look at it.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's really good to go there. I mean, I think to feel that, it really shows why we're doing what we're doing, but that's where we're trying to really have that catalyst implementation of the new pier. But I just want to go back a little bit, Gary. What's really unique about the Kingsbridge Armory and what's happening in the Mott Haven, these are both community land trusts, right?
Oh yes, and which goes back to our original dialogue.
Right, and that we are, it's a budding movement of communities like ours that are standing up and fighting back and saying, we want to be the guardians of our own public trust and create what we desire, either deeply affordable housing or community centers or waterfront access points that we have, that we implement, right? And so there's about 20 community land trusts around the city of New York, and they're all doing great stuff. And I think it's a movement that shows self-determination from the ground up, right? And so that's the impetus and the tool we're trying to utilize in both the Kingsbridge Armory and also the Mott Haven Port Morris Waterfront Plan.
And there's and again, it was in the materials you had sent me, field research, experimentation, analysis, climate education. There's a big educational part of this as well. So now instead of you take a group of school kids and say, look at the crappy shoreline we have, now you say, look at what we did, and then the students can then learn, and there's a whole education.
We've already started with some local schools. Old Clark, which is MS 223, we're doing STEM with them. We're creating air quality monitors with them. They've deployed them. They create their own hypotheses. We've also created a huge air quality monitoring network. We're going to have our students in the local schools involved in this. And we'll be partnering with other organizations that do work with NYCHA residents as well to make sure they're part of this, because we can't leave anyone behind.
You know, again, when you mention these things, I remember all the things that we have talked about in a number of years over for all the projects. This is exactly what was done at the Bronx River. I mean, there's no question that they brought people out there, they studied it, they learned it, and then, of course, over time, they figured out how to develop it. And of course, bring Jose the Beaver back in there. Almost out of time, Marshall. Let's see, 60,000 residents and 350,000 in the area. I mean, so we're not talking about just helping like a little community. We're talking about a lot of people. When you, God willing, get the chance to sit in front of somebody after sending them a proposal and say, "Look, we're making the pitch." What is the pitch you're going to say? What's the strongest element here that you think funders and grantors will appreciate and say, "Well, you know what, we got to do this"?
Starting out, I can think of no other county and in that particular neighborhood, no other neighborhood more deserving of environmental justice investment. The numbers that you just provided, I would also augment that with the fact that they also have some of the least access to green space. And the value in what we're trying to do is provide access to the waterfront. And again, I can't emphasize enough how important this is, not just for the impact that these immediate projects will have, but for how transformative they can be for the entire waterfront and one of the last untapped assets we have here in the Bronx.
And the waterfront, and also the people. We talked about education, we talked about job development. I mean, what else do you want to do to build a community? About a minute left, Mychal. What's next? What are you doing next? Are you going to keep poking Marshall and say, "Oh, come on, guys, help us"?
Oh, I mean, we're keep planting those seeds, Gary. I mean, they've been planted, and now we're going to keep nurturing and watering them and giving them life so they can grow. I mean, this is something that's going to help generations, and so there's more to this to come.
This really is, to me, the best of the Bronx. We get, this goes through history. Nobody else does it for us. We have to do it ourselves. Right. And here's yet another example of a community getting together, using government support and make it happen. We will be here at BronxNet and on BronxTalk to show it every step of the way. We want the grantors to take a look. This is so important. It'll be so great. You'll all be heroes if you get behind this, all right? That's my sale. Thank you so much, Mychal Johnson, for your passion. Marshall Strawbridge, you and your colleagues, thank them for all of us. And we thank everybody. Our producer is Rebecca Hemick, our director, Will Guzman, the editor, Yessie Diaz, she's unseen. Cast of thousands here in the studio, they're unseen as well. And of course to you, people of the Bronx, it's your borough, it's our borough, let's make it work. And so, if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, because we're going to fix the shoreline, I'll be back next week. Good night.